Alright, so for today's video, we are revisiting my rulings videos. I haven't done one in a while, and I figured we would talk about top 5 rulings you have to know that have to do with top meta decks of the format for YCS Dortmund or any other event coming up, and mainly just for this new ban list. We have a new format now, and it's not that different from the last one, but some decks did rise to the top, and Kashira did kind of fall off. So we have some important rules to discuss so you can be ahead of the competition. And if you like me doing these types of videos, please like the video as well. And let me know if you know any interesting rules that people should, I guess, be familiar with. And you can leave it in the comments down below as always. So for the first ruling, we're going to be talking about whether or not Unchained Soul of Rage with the effect to Link Summon can affect an unaffected Expertly Noir. And this is really important, obviously, because YCS Sao Paulo was ruled a specific type of way, and then 2 YCSs after that were ruled differently. So what really happened is the Sao Paulo YCS was ruled incorrectly, and that was basically corrected at the 2 other YCSs. And it really has to do with whether or not Unchained Soul of Rage is an activated effect and therefore would have to affect Noir in order to link with it or not. And what the case is that it is an activated effect, and that was confirmed with, I'm pretty sure the database, and if not that, there was an email also in the OCG that confirmed this. It is an activated effect, therefore it cannot affect an unaffected Noir. So like I said, Sao Paulo was ruled differently, but this has since been cleared up, so now we are all on the same page. It would have to affect it, and it cannot affect it, so nothing happens if you attempt to link summon with Noir. And now moving on to another Unchained ruling. It really doesn't have that much to do with Unchained actually, but we are going to go through some general tips in this video as well, which can help you, and they will help you with some random stuff that you'll find yourself in those situations. I promise you it's going to probably happen. And this one has to do with Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill, and this one, as you maybe are familiar with, is ruled differently in the OCG and in TCG. So I have an Unchained example for you, but the question is what happens? And also I probably have to clarify this. Most of my rulings and like explanations and actual ideas for, the questions that I guess I pose in these videos comes from the Judges Lounge. So shout out to that group. I usually take rulings from there and go through some of the answers to make sure that what I'm explaining is actually correct. I'm glad this group exists, and I always try to give them props in my videos. If during your turn, your opponent attempts to link summon with Unchained Soul of Rage and they link summon a Nightmare Unicorn or something that activates on summon. It's your turn though, and you have the Mourner in your hand. Would you have to activate Mourner as Chainlink 1, and then they can activate their on summon effect, which would be Nightmare Unicorn, for example? Or can they be Chainlink 1, and then you can chain as Chainlink 2 and actually successfully negate the Unicorn? Because if you're Chainlink 1, you resolve last. So at that point, Unicorn already resolved, and what actually happens? And the answer is that Mourner would have to be Chainlink 1 because you are turn player, and in OCG it's ruled differently. What happens is that the stuff on the field will activate first, and then cards from private locations activate. I might be like explaining this sort of in a weird way and not that professional. I totally know that, but it's a rule different in the OCG. There you could actually choose, but over here, if you are turn player, please don't attempt to cheat your opponent or force your opponent to like activate Unicorn first and then you go ahead and negate it. That's not how it's going to happen. And something to also clarify is that if you're attempting to pass priority, like that's not going to be a thing in this situation. If you pass priority to your opponent, your Mourner will not be able to be activated because you would have to activate it as Chainlink 1. So I think this is now cleared up, and we can move on to the next ruling. No more Unchained stuff. I'm pretty sure I have Pearly for the next ruling. So we are going to sort of refresh our knowledge about which cards trigger my friend Pearly. And what I want to read for you is, if a face-up Pearly XYZ monster you control leaves the field because of an opponent's card, even during the damage step, and then you can add up to 3 Pearly, and so on, you get the effect. If it leaves the field because of an opponent's card. Doesn't have to be card effect, just card. But some cards don't really affect cards, they make players perform actions. So we have to think about which cards actually trigger my friend Pearly and which cards don't. So in the group of cards that do not trigger it, so please don't get cheated by that, is any card that's gonna make the player perform the action, because it's not really affecting any card on the field. It is just forcing the player to do something. So essentially, if you activate Evenly Matched, Herald of the Abyss, a Daruma Karma Cannon, for example, the second part of the effect where you force your opponent to do something, in all of these instances, my friend Pearly will not be able to trigger. So make sure you don't get cheated. However, there is XYZ Encore, which is actually a card affecting the card that is bouncing back, because that's worded a tiny bit weirdly, because Noir is still unaffected, but it can be affected by XYZ Encore, because first it's trying to affect the materials. It like detaches them. It has to do with the materials. And at that point, Noir doesn't have any more. So it can be affected by the card and it gets bounced back. And in the case of any other XYZ, you know, it's just kind of obvious. So my friend Birdly will be able to trigger because of Encore, for example. It's causing the card to leave the field. Maybe that's like a bit of a better wording than affecting, but it just might be the same. So I'm trying my best here, trying to explain everything. So those will be the cards that usually get used against this deck. So just make sure you don't get cheated accidentally or intentionally. And moving on to a Rescue Ace ruling. So what we're going to be talking about is Rescue Ace Turbulence versus Rika Konkon. And in the case of Rika Konkon, actually, let me pull up the card and we're gonna read Konkon as well. Once per turn, if you would tribute a plant monster you control to activate a Rika card or effect, you can tribute any one face-up monster your opponent controls, even though you do not control it. And a lot of Rika cards are going to tribute plants for cost. So what happens if your opponent controls a Rescue Ace Turbulence, which says if another card you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, except during the damage step, you can target a card on the field and destroy it. And for example, you control the Rika Konkon and your opponent has the Turbulence as well as another card, and you just, by the effect of Rika Konkon, tribute something of theirs for cost. Rescue Ace Turbulence will not be able to be used, and maybe that seems obvious because it was tributed for cost, but there's the confusion about Rika Konkon being a card effect, making it so you can tribute your opponent's cards instead of a plant monster or as a plant monster or however. But this effect just means that yes, this card can be used, but it's not an actual card effect making the card be used if it gets used for cost, which a lot of Rika cards do. So hopefully I explained this well, but essentially Turbulence will not be able to use in those instances where Konkon would just replace a plant for cost with another of your opponent's cards. And as for the last one, Shifter is still in the meta, and sometimes there's confusion about, you know, when cards would send something to the graveyard, either for effect or for cost, if those cards can actually be activated under Shifter. And for this example, we have a card like Terrors of the Overroot, which we will read through it, and it says target one card your opponent controls and one card in their graveyard. Send that card on the field to the grave, and if you do, set the other card from the grave to your opponent's field. And if Shifter is active and you're trying to send something to the grave and set the other card to the field, what's actually going to happen? Because first we need to clarify that if something gets sent to the graveyard for cost for a card, it's not going to be able to even be activated under a card that's making everything go to the banish pile, like Defissure, like specifically if it's a monster, or Shifter if it's covering everything, Macrocosmos, all of these. So with Terrors of the Overroot, we can see that it's not part of any cost. The first part before the semicolon, and then the second part is about sending the cards to the graveyard. But then the question arises if the other card will actually be sent to the field, since the first one wasn't sent to the graveyard to begin with. And how to explain this is just problem-solving card text. I will put an amazing picture for you on the screen. It's a graph of how to decipher the PSCT words, but that's what you can always go by. And if you look at, and if you do the first part, which is a has to happen for B to happen. So with Terrors of the Overroot, it's a legal activation because it's not part of any cost. But since the first part cannot be fulfilled when we're looking at everything that's post the semicolon, the second part will not happen. So when attempting to resolve it, it's just going to get banished, and then the other card will not be set to the field because the first one didn't successfully hit the graveyard. But since Shifter is in play, it still attempted to go there, and then it just went to the banish pile. So that's what's up. If it's not part of any cost, just try to follow problem-solving card text as best as you can. And if it's part of any cost, make sure you're not doing any illegal activations. So that's gonna be it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed, and hopefully I covered some rulings that actually come up for you guys. Please let me know if there's any other ideas you might have for, rules and everything that has to do with rulings. I always love reading through those and like learning new stuff. And if you like the video, like it as well. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.